Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome back to the Gifts for Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women of God who use their talents, passions, and gifts to honor and glorify God. And we have a great episode this week. We talked to Danea Zeigle. Danea does fitness. She does public speaking. She does all sorts of great ministry things, trying to reach people in unlikely places. Sometimes we who go to church want to stay within those four walls, and Danea has been moved and motivated by God to go outside the walls of the church, and she was really touched by God in an experience outside those four walls, and that's what has led her on her current path. And it was really a fun interview to get to chat with her, to talk to her about her current path that God has set her on, an unlikely path, one that she never saw coming. But she's a lovely young woman, and I really encourage you to listen to this interview. Follow her on Facebook and on Instagram, and just get to know what Danea Zeigle is doing. And she's somebody that can come out to your church and your event and provide a wonderful and a powerful speech. And we get to talk to her in just a moment. But first, I want to remind you that, yes, I know it's still kind of in the middle of the summer, and we're not really looking towards the holiday season yet. But those big events take months of planning. As somebody that's been planning PureFest for a full year now, I know that these events take time to prepare for. So as you're getting ready for your year-end events, your fall events, maybe even your early spring events in 2020, you're looking for great talent, great entertainment. Let me suggest Well-Versed Comedy. We do clean comedy that's safe for all ages. We come intentionally to not offend, to make sure that everyone can enjoy comedy together. We do improv, which means that every single show is completely different. We never do the same show twice. It's all based on the audience. So your group, whether it's your company, whether it's your church, whether it's your youth group, whatever the group may be, whatever the audience may be, they dictate the flow of the show, because we feed off of their suggestions. We feed off of their energy. So every show is completely unique. Every show is completely customizable. And we want to do that for you and for your event coming up this winter, whether it's for a holiday event, maybe next spring for whatever event you may have, birthday parties, retirement parties, end-of-year celebrations, volunteer celebrations. We want to be a part of that and bring you clean entertainment that's going to be affordable for your budget and give your people a wonderful experience that they won't soon forget. Wellversedcomedy.com, wellversedcomedy.com to get in contact with us, or you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We're at Wellversed CMDY, at Wellversed CMDY. And now let's get to our interview with Danea Zeigle right here on the Gifts for Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women of God using their gifts, talents, and passions to honor and glorify God. And I'm now joined remotely by Danea Zeigle. Danea, I hope I pronounced that right. I know that I was afraid before we recorded I would butcher it, but I think I got it. How'd I do?
You did great.
We connected. You found our podcast and you gave your testimony via email, and I was really intrigued by it and thought it was really a great testimony. But first, tell us about what you're doing now, what your ministry is.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm kind of in such a fun transition in life. I do some remote jobs that just give me a ton of flexibility. So right now my main focus has just been going and traveling to different churches and different youth groups and doing just some speaking events. And on the side, I love to write. I love communication. I'm wildly passionate about the art of communication. Just because of how I grew up and just feeling so lost and confused about who God was. And so I just love talking about God and sharing with others who He is in a way that's easy to understand and relatable, not this like big abstract kind of concept or idea. So I love to write. I write for God TV, and then I also wrote a ebook Bible study, and I'm currently in the works of working on some other fun stuff too.
Awesome. And how did you get into speaking? What door opened that led you to say, I want to go out and just talk to people?
Gosh, that is a great question. So when I was 20. I think I was 20. I got involved with a ministry called Next Step Ministries, and I went out to Los Angeles for a summer to serve on Skid Row, actually. I don't know if you're familiar with Skid Row, but it's an area in downtown Los Angeles with, about 13,000 homeless people in a span of 8 blocks. And my role was to kind of be the speaker for the week that youth groups would come, and they would do mission trips on Skid Row. And so part of my job was, educating people about the streets, but also being the main keynote speaker for their mission trip week. And so that summer, I think I delivered like over 55 messages back to back to back to back, but I fell in love with it and just sharing my story. And I just found so much healing, honestly, in being vulnerable and being real and just sharing about my life and the hard things and the real things, but the amazing things and the growth points. And so it was a really special time, and it kind of awoke this passion in me to continue to share about me and my story, and just see God use some of the most painful things in my life for some of the most beautiful moments I've ever experienced since.
Was there anything about working on Skid Row and doing those the speaking engagements, that many? What surprised you there, and maybe talk about what may have changed in you by being in that experience?
Gosh, everything surprised me about Skid Row. I grew up kind of in northern Wisconsin, very not Skid Row-ish, like grew up on a beautiful lake surrounded by forests. I had no idea what inner city ministry was. And I felt this prompting to go specifically to LA, specifically to the streets. And I had no idea why. And when I got there, honestly, I was like, I'm so out of my element. And I remember walking the streets the first day I got there. And I mean, it was just an entirely new world. I remember just seeing so many tents and so many kids playing, there was kids running around with one shoe on and just all of this stuff. And I saw all this brokenness, but at the same time, I saw so much beauty. And I saw, that these people aren't these projects, but they're actually just people. And they're so similar to me. And I remember walking the streets, and God kind of planted this idea in me. And he said, Danea, that soul is just as important as your soul. And I have made some of my best friends out on those streets. And they're so valuable, and they have so much to contribute to society. And gosh, it honestly changed my life. It absolutely marked my life. And how I view people, and how I view circumstances, and how I view pain, and how I view glory. Everything surprised me about the streets. Yeah, it was amazing.
So that had to be an incredible culture shock at first, coming from Midwest and then going out to Skid Row, where you hear the word Skid Row and you hear the connotation that, it's no man's land. It's not where you want to ever be. And so it had to be a huge culture shock. How did you find yourself getting over that initial culture shock?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I think God just gave me so much divine grace. I am such a people person, and I love people so much. And like I said, the more that I just talked to people and got to know people, not in the sense of like I'm trying to fix you or I have an agenda with you, but actually just having a conversation and getting to know people, I realized, wow, like actually they're so similar to me. And there were parts of my story, my personal testimony, that I resonated so much with them, because I remember a time in my life where I felt like a criminal, and I felt like the worst of the worst and the lowest of lows. And so I could connect with these people on a really intimate level, to where at the end of it all, they didn't seem like, the homeless people, quote unquote, but they actually seemed like brothers and sisters and friends to me, friends that you would just hang out with in any other circle of life or any other, location. So yeah, I think that's kind of what helped.
And I think you touched on something very important right there as far as ministry work. It's not about fixing people. I think a lot of people consider that they aren't able to fix somebody, so why are they going to get into ministry? Where the fixing has got to be done by God. It's just we have to be the
Mhm.
relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's pretty naive of us to feel like we're so powerful to save someone. It's a savior complex. That's not our job. The Bible is so clear about what our job is. It's to love God and love people. And yeah, he does the saving, which is great, honestly.
It takes a lot of the pressure off, I think, if the results are not up to us. We just have to go and be obedient.
Oh yeah, it's so not high stakes when you have the right position. So yeah, it was incredible.
Absolutely. So let's backtrack a little bit. We talked about what you're doing now and how it got started, but let's go further back to how it really got started. As comfortable as you are with it, share your testimony, how you found the Lord, and your childhood and everything else that led to you finding your relationship with God.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a Christian home. My parents, I always joke about this, but they put me in every church thing possible. I tell people I was like oversaved, honestly. So I remember being in Sunday school and my Sunday school teacher, asking the class, hey, if anyone wants to invite Jesus into their heart, he'll make a home in it. And I remember thinking like, that's so weird, but I wanted a Kit Kat. So I was like, yeah, I'm down. And from there, I guess, I knew about God at least. And like I said, was put in every church program possible. You name it, I was in it. Vacation Bible school, Bible quizzing. Believe it or not, I did that. Summer camps, mission trips, youth group, Christian sports camp, Christian, just anything that had the label Christian, I was in it, enrolled in it. And so growing up, I knew a ton about God, but I'll tell you, there's a big difference between knowing about God and actually knowing God.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when all of this was happening, I love my parents. They really did the best that they could. But I grew up in a really performance-based household. And I think that's pretty typical just within our culture. We're a culture that praises performance. And so from a very young age, I really wasn't great at school. I was like the super active kid. And so it's so hard for me to chill out in school. And I remember being in first grade and I brought my report card home. And well, for some reason, the school did something different. They had graded based on 3 different letter grades. And it was either you were satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or above average. And I remember bringing my report card home and I had a bunch of U's on it and I had no idea what that meant. I was in first grade. And my parents sat me down and they were explaining to me, hey, you are unsatisfactory in this area, in this area, in this area, in this area. And I remember as a first grader, my heart just sunk and just thinking I couldn't differentiate, I was unsatisfactory at math, history, whatever. But I just thought in my head, man, I'm not good enough. Who I am is just not good enough. So I need to do something better to be better. And from that moment, there was this idea planted in my head that I had to perform to be known, to earn love, to earn affection, and to earn attention. And nobody explicitly said that to me, but that was what I kind of got. And from that moment, I started performing. I would look and I would study the things around me and I'd be like, okay, that kid's getting praise. So I'm going to do what that kid's doing. And I would just, I was just craving so much love and so much attention and so much affection. And my parents, God bless them, they really did their best, but they were pretty disconnected from us. My parents owned their own business and they worked crazy hours. So we never really saw them as kids. And, as a kid, you need your parents, you need that relationship, you need that validation. And because I didn't feel like I got that unless I did some kind of crazy public performance, it just made this insatiable hunger for being noticed.
Absolutely. So you come with that performance mentality, and how did God break you free of that? Or is this something you're still wrestling with today?
That's a great question. It definitely took years. Because like I said, we live in a culture that praises performance. And so the idea of I don't have to perform for love, or I don't have to perform for attention or affection, was something that I didn't even understand the concept of it until kind of later in my testimony, where God ended up telling me he loves me in one of the most dirty places I ever felt in my life, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's amazing how God works, and it seems like he's this master at picking that 11th hour when it seems like there's no hope. He's like, oh, wait, there's hope.
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll go forward a little bit, and this is in the testimony you shared on the form that you sent over to us, talking about the accident when you were 17. How much of that do you want to share, and how did that have an impact on your life?
Yeah, so I was in high school, and, on the outside, like, things looked really good.
Mm-hmm.
I was a pretty popular kid. I was a prom queen. I kind of had things all together, it looked like. But to be honest, I was really struggling. Like, I was struggling with the performance thing. I was struggling with, the idea that of God even, and church just was unappealing. But I had gone on a mission trip and kind of saw an aspect of God where I'm like, okay, maybe I could do this, right? And so I started praying, and one night I prayed, and I was crying. I remember this. I prayed because I was reading Philippians. I was reading about Paul's life, and I was like, God, if I'm going to be a Christian, I want to be a Christian like Paul, who can praise you in any moment, in any, like, that's real faith. Mm-hmm. And literally the next day, I was driving on my way to school, and I got in a serious car accident where another person ended up dying. And, man, it ruined me as a 17-year-old. And it was, the most earth-shattering thing I had ever experienced. And because when you look death in the face, something marks you.
Right.
And, it just flipped my world upside down. So, after that day, I really struggled because I just kind of refreshed my faith. And literally the next day, this thing happens. And I remember going home and I was praying. I was like, God, do a miracle. Like, I believe in you. I was praying so hard. I remember, like, throwing up in my bathroom. I was so, so hopeful, really. And to get the news that this person ended up dying, it just really made me question who God was. Like, is he good? Like, does he care? And that year I went through, a crazy depression and a lot of PTSD, flashbacks, and nightmares. And I remember I would cry myself to sleep every single night, and I'd wake up and I would look in the mirror, and I just would hate who I saw. Like, I didn't see this 17-year-old girl that had the world before her. Like, I actually looked in the mirror and I saw a criminal. Like, I saw a murderer, Mm-hmm. And I really struggled with self-hatred at the craziest level you could imagine.
I'm sure, and it's very typical of how the enemy hears. Oh, she's saying this prayer like, God, let me be like Paul, and then the enemy finds a way to try to bring you back down. thinking that he's going to tear you down, but your story shows that you may have fallen, but you got right back up, or God lifted you back up.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I was like, I don't know if I got it.
After all this, you're battling depression and trying to numb the pain, I think, through alcohol and other things. How did you get relief? How did you break free from that cycle of self-hatred, of blaming yourself for the accident and everything like that? How did God finally break through that door for you?
Yeah. So like you said, I'm 17. I didn't have an idea of how to cope with this kind of pain. So I ran to alcohol not because honestly, I just wanted to escape from reality. That was the biggest thing. And I was like, okay, this is the way that I could do it. And, one day I ended up just drinking, way too much. And my parents found me the next morning, passed out on my basement floor. And, they had no idea what had happened. And they called 911, and I was airlifted to multiple hospitals, actually, until I landed in Mayo Clinic. And I was in a coma with alcohol poisoning. And the doctors told my parents, we don't know if she's going to make it. And my parents just prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And 2 days later, I woke up. And, every time I talk about it, I can hear that heart rate monitor in the background. But I remember waking up and having this moment in the hospital bed where it was like I heard the audible voice of God saying, Danea, I love you the same on your worst days as your best days. And it was so marking for me because, I didn't want anything to do with God at that point in my life. Like, it was like we were running this race and I was booking it one direction, but he was just hauling it after me. Like, he was not going to let me go. And I remember thinking, like, man, if he could want me, like, when I have nothing to give and when I feel like I'm just a burden, when I feel like I'm an inconvenience, like, it was the first time I felt like love in a way where I didn't have anything to give in return. And that was the love that I fell in love with, so to say. And it was from that moment in the hospital bed where I said, okay, God, if my days don't belong to you, then they don't mean anything to me. And that is when I would say I truly found God and got to know him as he truly is and got to know what it actually means to be unconditionally loved. Love when you don't have anything to give, love when you don't have anything to offer, love when you're an inconvenience or you're a burden or all these other ideas, and it was kind of honestly from there, an uphill battle a little bit. I won't say like overnight everything got easy. That would be pretty naive, but I will say, it was a choice to walk with hope because as soon as I left the hospital room, I was walking right back into everything that brought me there. Mm-hmm. I couldn't change my history. I couldn't change my family. I couldn't change the toxic relationships around. Like, there were all these circumstances that were waiting for me the minute that I got out of that hospital room, right? Mm-hmm. And so I determined in my mind, I said, you know what? I am not going to be a victim to my circumstances. It says in the Bible that we are overcomers. So I'm going to be a powerful person, and I am going to be an overcomer, and I'm going to choose to walk with hope. And I love Psalms 23 when it talks about, when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, because it's a win. It's like, it's going to happen. It's not a surprise. First Peter says, don't be surprised at the fiery trial that's upon you right now, And so it's like, okay, I'm going to walk through the valley of the shadow of the death, but there's another really important word in that verse. And it's when I walk through, like, we don't have to camp out there. And I think that's what I kept telling myself is I don't have to camp out here. I don't have to build my house in the valley. Like, I'm walking through this thing. There's hope knowing where you're going, right? And
Right.
so I had my eyes set on the hope that was set before me. And I said, you know what, this is a momentary thing. And I'm going to be walking, and there's going to be a table with a feast set before my enemies. And I'm going to that table, and I don't care how long it takes me to get there, but my eyes are set on that table. And so I think that's kind of what brought me out of depression and all of those other kind of symptoms. Even all my PTSD symptoms are completely gone now. I don't struggle with addiction. I don't struggle with depression. And it's just been amazing to see that journey and just what hope can do.
Wow, that's awesome. And I've never heard anybody mention that before about the 23rd Psalm. As I walk through the valley, it means that there's progress because you're walking through, meaning that there's a beginning and an end to that valley. And I think that that's something that people don't really think about, is that we're going to walk through those trials and tribulations, the win, but you go through it. You don't stay there. So I think that's a really important point. I just wanted to reiterate that here for anybody listening, that we will face trials and tribulations, but we will be going through them. We won't be living in them for eternity.
Totally. It's a game changer.
That's really is a very impressive thought that I'm just kind of floored that I've never even heard or thought about that before, but you go through it. You're not living there permanently. So that's a really cool thought. So thank you for sharing that part and sharing your testimony. So you've gone through all this. You've been to that moment where God saw you at your lowest and still said that he loved you and helped deliver you from all this depression and self-hate. Where or how soon after that did you decide that you needed to tell your story and start telling people that there's hope?
Yeah, this was terrifying for me. This was totally terrifying for me. So the thing about this is, while I was going through all that depression, in that season, it was my senior year of high school, I didn't tell a soul because I felt like I'm going to be a burden. Like, I'm already a burden. Like, I don't want people, I'm supposed to have it all together. I'm, looked at as like a leader in youth group. And it just felt like it was impossible for me to be vulnerable. And after, coming out of a hospital and being in this, really raw state, I kind of made it a job to myself. Maybe not a job's a bad word, but I kind of made a promise to myself of like, you know what, I'm going to just be real. Like, if God loves me how I am, like, why am I trying to be someone that I'm not in front of other people? And so when I went to college like a month after I came out of the hospital. And I went to this private Christian college, and this was honestly terrifying for me because I feel like in a lot of those church environments, people don't feel the freedom to just be them. And so it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I made that a promise. I said, I'm not going to fake it. And so I went to this college, and I was really raw and really real with people. And let me tell you, it was not accepted in a lot of places. And it took me a long time to find friends. And for a while, I kind of felt like the campus side project. But, but it taught me how to be me, even if people don't accept it, and how to be honest with my process, even if it's embarrassing or, even if no one else is being real with it. And it was a really important lesson because that is what I think mobilized me to be able to speak about things today and be brave and be vulnerable and be real and release other people to be real and vulnerable with where they're at.
And I'm sure that training ground also gave you that fearlessness to know that regardless of what the majority thinks, there's going to be that one person that needs to hear what I have to say, and that one person that I can make a difference in their life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I totally remember the first moment that, I did share and someone came up to me and they, they just shared like, wow, like I resonated so much. That meant the world. And I don't know, that it was like that moment where I was like, whoa, like actually God can use this. Like actually this marked someone. And if it was just for that one person, even if my whole life, if it was just for that one person, for someone to feel like, oh, okay, God can love me too, then awesome. I could die happy, even at this point, if it was just one person. Because again, it's that same phrase, like that soul is just as important and valuable as my soul. And so, yeah, it's not about the masses, it really is the one,
Absolutely. Well, Danea, I love your story, and it's incredible. Your website is Zeigle.com, spelled DANEAZEIGLE.com, and we'll have that linked in the show notes. You're a speaker, you're a fitness coach, and you do a lot of different things. So it's you're definitely a very busy woman.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to be busy for sure.
Awesome. Well, as we end our interviews, one thing we do on the Gifts for Glory podcast, we do the interrogation, which is 7 quick questions, things that we probably haven't covered yet, just to kind of get to know you better and also to just see what comes off the top of your head. Most of them are fun, but some of them may dig a little deep. So, whatever the honest answer is, feel free to share. And if there's something I ask that you prefer not to answer, that's fine too. So,
okay, awesome.
The first question is favorite ice cream.
Easily, mint chocolate chip. Wow, it's amazing.
I won't vote against that one. All right, number 2. Your favorite type of music and your favorite artist currently.
Ooh, honestly, I really love like chill music. I don't know if it's because I'm getting older now, but I really love like a Coldplay style music. And for worship, I really love like Will Reagan. Wow, so good.
Okay, very nice. All right, what's your biggest fear in life?
Biggest fear. I think that my biggest fear would probably be not feeling like a place of belonging. It's hard when we live in the world that we live in, because it says, we're not citizens of the world, we're citizens of heaven. But I really believe every person truly wants to belong where they are, and every person truly seeks connection and belonging. And being accepted for who they are. And that's what I would say.
Okay. All right, question number 4. Your favorite moment so far as a speaker or as a coach? As a fitness coach?
Honestly, I love speaking to youth groups. They're so fun. Like, I still feel like such a kid at heart. And so, I love the rowdy kids because I get them. Like I was totally that kid that, my youth group pastor actually would tell me like he would dream of kicking me out of Sunday school. Like I was like a difficult kid. And so there's times where I'll go speak at youth groups with some difficult kids that just are really loud and rowdy. And I just banter back and forth with them, and they feel so loved, and we're just besties by the end of it. And it's usually those kids that I get to sit down and have really deep and meaningful connections with afterwards. And those are probably some of my favorite moments, because I look in that kid's eyes and I see a little me in them, and I love it.
Awesome. Okay, question number 5. Biggest regret.
Oh, biggest regret. That's a hard one, because I kind of look back and I see so many dumb moments that I've like done just dumb things. And, but I see what I learned from it, and I see where God's taken me as a result from it. And so I don't think I would have a regret, in a serious manner. But I will say my mom is Mexican, and I never learned any Mexican dishes in the kitchen. And to this day, I'm a terrible cook. So I would go back and I would learn some amazing Mexican recipes. That's what I would do.
Okay, awesome. Who are your current influences in your ministry or in your faith, outside, obviously, of the Scripture?
Yeah, I really love Justin and Abby Stumble. They're some life consultants, and they do a lot around emotional wholeness and emotional health. And being a person that's come out of trauma, I just really resonate with a lot of their messaging.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love that they're concerned about not only like healing people's lives spiritually, but healing people's lives emotionally. I really believe God came to set us free from everything, that's including, physical ailments, spiritual ailments, and, emotional pain. So I really believe that they're really after wholeness, and that's something I'm after too. So I really am pretty influenced by them.
Okay, awesome. Final question. Outside of what you're doing now, what would be your dream job to do for a living?
Oh, dream job to do for a living. I would love to do more work with teens. I did a lot of work with at-risk teens in the past and just fell in love with it. And so I would love to be able to honestly provide a camp experience for teens that's really like amazing, but specifically for urban kids, because I think there's a lack of that and a lack of the finances for them to be able to do that and to do it really well. That's the other side of it. So I would love to provide an awesome summer camp experience for urban teenagers that's like amazing, incredible, and just done really well. And have a lot of Jesus and a lot of fun and a lot of dancing and good food.
That sounds great. Well, Danea, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I'm really glad we were able to connect and that you reached out, because it's been a real fun conversation. And I love what you're doing. I love your passion, and it's easy to hear your passion to share God's love with a multitude of people, especially the teens. So just thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. This is a blast.
Awesome. Well, again, the website is DaneaZeigle.com. It's in the show notes, so be sure to check out her webpage, follow her public page on Facebook. And she's got a heart and a passion to speak and share God. So bring her out to your youth event or anything else that you need somebody with passion and a great story to tell. So Danea, again, thank you very much. And we pray blessings over your ministry and more opportunities for you to get out there and tell the God story.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dave. This was amazing.